We're using Indiana as a case study this week on the Trapeze to talk about gerrymandering and redistricting pressures in their state. We have Lieutenant Governor of Indiana, Micah Beckwith, and Indiana State Representative Ed DeLaney. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, thank you.
Lieutenant Governor, let's start with you. Briefly, what is the parameters of the redistricting rules in Indiana?
Well, the legislature has the authority to do it. The governor would have to call the legislature back into a special session, and then per their authority given to them by the Constitution, they could do that. They would obviously have to follow the Supreme Court guidelines when it comes to demographics and making sure that they're counting from a demographic perspective fairly. But they can do it. I mean, it is certainly within their purview to make it happen.
Okay, now Representative DeLaney, generally speaking, the rule of thumb is that you do redistricting once every 10 years after the census, but it seems like there's pressure being brought to bear in Indiana right now to do a redistricting. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's the biggest pressure possible. The White House is demanding that we do it. They sent the vice president here to engage in what I call shoplifting, stealing not candy bars, but stealing congressional districts. So the pressure is all from Washington. There was no internal call for this. There's no tradition of doing it midterms. We don't do it. We're not used to it. And obviously the Republicans are having stomach pains over it. They don't want to do it. That's why they keep dragging this out. There's no motivation to do it other than to do what the guy in the White House wants.
Lieutenant Governor, the pros and cons of doing the redistricting outside of the 10-year window. Talk to me.
Yeah, so I think the pros is that we will have an accurate count of people who are not supposed to be counted. So what I've said is Indiana has to compete with states like California who are counting illegal immigrants in their census, which is unfairly bloating their representation in Congress. And then you have Illinois and Massachusetts and Connecticut that have gerrymandering through the nose. There's no Republican or very little Republican representation in those states. And Indiana has to compete on a federal level with those states that are not playing fairly. And so what I've said, let's follow President Trump's leadership on this. I supported his call for this right away. I was the first statewide official to do so because he's teaching us how to fight fire with fire. And I think Indiana really should listen to what the White House is saying.
So, gentlemen, it seems like for every action, there's a reaction with respect to gerrymandering these days. And if one state's a Democratic state decides to do it, then a Republican state is going to try and respond and try and justify it. But I got this one question for both of you, and it should be a pretty simple question. Representative DeLaney, I'll start with you. If you could get rid of gerrymandering and ensure that it doesn't happen nationwide, would you do so?
Absolutely. I think it would require a national solution, and it wouldn't be simple because there are a lot of factors to be considered. But we had a halfway decent system till the Supreme Court walked away, washed its hands of it, and said they couldn't deal with it. So, yeah, but I think we need Congress to lead us into a nationwide system. Until then, I in Indiana and other Democrats here are pushing to have our own system of neutral outside commissioners to do this. And by the way, I'm sorry to hear that apparently for 20 years, Indiana has been counting illegal immigrants. I guess that's why we're doing this. The Republicans have run this show for 20 years. They've made the laws tighter and tighter and tighter every year to vote. But apparently we have a burgeoning problem of illegal voters in Indiana. Go for it, Lieutenant Governor. Deal with it, will you?
Lieutenant Governor, I take it, would you be for, I shouldn't assume, would you be for getting rid of gerrymandering nationwide if you could?
Absolutely. If we could trust that, Democrat-run states like California and Illinois would play fairly, Indiana would absolutely love to play fairly. But unfortunately, Democrats have been screwing the system for many decades, and Republicans, we try to play according to the game that was set out, but we realize the rules are being changed right underneath our nose, and we've got to actually fight fire with fire. And so, again, President Trump is teaching the Republican Party how to fight again, and Democrats like my friend Ed DeLaney, they don't like it because we're now playing by the rules they themselves have been playing by for many decades.
So, Lieutenant Governor, I'll stick with you for a moment. It's clear you have very different views of what's going on in Indiana and nationwide, and you're kind of a microcosm, in my mind, of the problem nationwide. For every action, there's a reaction. But Lieutenant Governor, tell me, how would you fix it, and what do you think it would take to fix it?
Well, I think Representative DeLaney is actually correct. It would be a very complicated nationwide solution. And so we'd have to all the players would have to come to the table in good faith. That means all 50 states would have to actually have a desire to see it operating fairly. And I just don't know if we're going to get there, unfortunately. The Supreme Court can weigh in on it. Absolutely. They've done that in the past. But even still, we've seen the Supreme Court weigh in on it, and states still don't play fairly. And so, I mean, it would take a national solution. But until then, unfortunately, this is we've been bringing knives to a gunfight for a long time. I think President Trump is saying, "Hey, Republicans, stop doing that. The Democrats are beating us, through these tactics. We got to start playing by their rules that they've been instituting for the last 2-3 decades."
So when you say a national solution, what does that look like, Lieutenant Governor?
Well, I think the Supreme Court would have to weigh in on it. I think they would be the ones to be able to say, here are the parameters. I think Congress really needs to do their job. And again, I agree with what Ed said. Congress really is the most powerful branch of government. And typically they abdicate their responsibility to agencies or to the judicial branch or the executive branch. And what they should do is grab the reins and say, this is how we're going to do it on a national stage. This is how it's going to be fair for everybody involved. And I think that would be a great solution. But until then, I'm thankful for President Trump and his leadership.
Representative DeLaney, what are your thoughts on what the actual solution would look like nationwide?
Well, the actual solution will be completely eliminated as a possibility if they play this trick, because once they steal enough seats to lock in their control in Washington, they're not going to change. So there'll be no congressional solution if this year's shoplifting of congressional districts continues. California had a neutral law and they preserved it. If Texas does not redistrict, California will stay with their neutral law. That's a rational system, but the attempt to have state-by-state solutions is over because of this trick.
Okay, so if you don't have
trick meaning the Trump trick.
If you don't have the state-by,
we can't do that. So we'll have to do congressional, and we won't if they win this time.
So if you, the congressional action you think is what happens, should happen, Representative DeLaney, what would that look like?
The court's not going to do this.
But what would it look like?
The court will not do this.
What would it look like for Congress? What kind of bill would it be?
You got to get to some gentle considerations. I'll give you a simple example. Sometimes we pay attention to putting 3 members in the same district, 3 incumbent members. We don't want to do that. Can Congress say, well, you can't shove people into the same district to get rid of them? These get to be very difficult questions. But you could have a check that if the state's voting population is 20% Democrat, then they get at least 10 and not more than 30. You get what I mean? You could set some parameters. But to shut us out, which is the tactic in Indiana, Pastor Beckwith wants to get up in front of his churchgoers and tell them, you can't vote for Democrats without going to hell. And by the way, you don't have to worry about it because we fixed all 10 seats. All 9 seats. There will be no Democrats. Thank you, Lord. Okay?
All right, gentlemen.
Get serious about this.
We have a minute left, so just a very brief answer. Lieutenant Governor, I ask you first. Is it fair to say you think voters ultimately suffer when there's gerrymandering going on? 10 seconds.
I think that's fair to say. And again, like I said earlier, I wish we could get rid of gerrymandering everywhere. But like my friend Ed over there, the Democrats have taught us how to gerrymander. And unfortunately, Republicans are just now catching up. And they don't like that we're playing by the same tactics that they've been doing for many years. And I think Indiana is doing the right thing by following President Trump's lead here.
Mr. Landy, you have 30 seconds to respond.
All I got to say is I've seen that the Lieutenant Governor has his prayer wall prominently displayed behind him. I hope to God he puts my name up there. And I hope he gets more sense. I hope he prays for his sense and my salvation. Thank you.
I'm praying for you every day, Ed.
There we go.
There we go. We ended on a high note there. Thank you both very much, gentlemen.